think I just wanted to talk a little about the nature of reality and just insert some energy into a different paradigm than the one from the social emotional world. And we were all kind of raised within the idea, well, let's just take that, what I just said right there. We were all kind of raised within the idea. We're trapped so much inside of a false reality that every aspect of our relationship to it is solidifying it more. So, to even say we're all raised, right there, you're already imprisoned. The idea that we, which includes I, or you and I, being of the same thing, and time being relatively in the past, we're all, as if that's possible, being raised, which again, it's just referring to something that's in the past. And because it's in the past, the only way for it to have validity is for it to be referencing something in the present. And for that to happen, we keep ourselves in a continuous state of being the older version of what we're referencing. And that makes for a lot of problems. If you think about it in terms of, I refer to the path a lot. If you think about it in terms of the path, which is the path from unconscious selfishness to a state of, from my current perspective, unconditional allowance, detachment, and the joy that comes along with that level of self-trust. Then you can understand that there is more room for more things to be said, because everything that's being said is being said from the perspective of what can we do? What can we do as people to be free? How do we release ourselves from the pain and the tyranny and the suppression and the pain and the fear? But that's just truly not possible within the framework. You're not going to be able to get out of fear by being a continuation of something from the past, because the very foundation of it is fear. The very foundation of things like language are, I shouldn't necessarily say fear, but limitation. The ability to categorize things is magic. What we consider our language captured infinity and turned it into, using magic, turned it into a limited thing. And now we live inside it. And so what do we do? Like, why are we alive? What is the whole reason for the experience even? And it's that the idea of what we're doing isn't necessarily important. And we might not necessarily know exactly what we are doing here, but what is possible is the ability to transcend the viewpoint of one singular fear-based entity and to live as it. When we exchange energy when we were children with things we used to define the world, then we created the context of who we are. So there's no way to heal. I mean, in present time, you can't really heal because a lot of what we are is created as a defense mechanism to a subjective opinion in the past. And so just because subjective opinions become patterns, it doesn't make them objective laws of reality. Okay? And so we're under the impression that the only things we can change are within a certain level of zoomed in or out, and that's not true. You can zoom out or zoom in, and both directions that you head in very quickly transcend beyond the social, emotional, 3D world that we're mapping ourselves being in completely. For example, anything that you do, let's say you go running. When you're running, unless you are running in a social space and you are focusing on how people are seeing you or not seeing you, let's say you're running by yourself at a track somewhere, abandoned, there's nobody around. Now, when you're not being observed socially, more energy is being poured into the experience that you're having as a first-person entity, which isn't something which really you can't even connect with the thing that's in the mirror or the thing that you think people see in an abstract way. So just right there, the people who have been seen physically their whole lives and have never had to recalibrate their energy in situations where they're not being collapsed on a quantum level to a particle by other people. And what I mean by that is there's a collaboration to who they are. And so if they've never experienced being outside of that collaboration, then the thoughts and the reality are being experienced and created by the made-up character being observed. You are playing a character that people are seeing. And I think there's so much of that. That's why we have mirrors to validate that. So you can validate it in your life. Without a mirror, you wouldn't even really know that existed, other than the abstract idea that because you can see other people, they can see you. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. And again, keep in mind that when you see yourself, you're seeing yourself the same way you see other people, through your lenses. So you're staring at things that show your limitations, or if you look in the mirror and you think it's beautiful or whatever, a lot of that has to do with justifying the opposite of your insecurity, which is again considered growth in a sense, manifestation, certain social mantras on a shallow level, like I am beautiful. These type of things, they can take you through transformations, but they take you on such a long path because that path includes all the baggage of being the person that's not beautiful. And so even if you end up thinking you're beautiful, you're just the person who doesn't think they're beautiful, convincing themselves that they are beautiful. And in the first place, you're just something that's not like that at all, viewing yourself through somebody else, and then thinking of yourself as beautiful or ugly through a standard or context that you don't know, which is based off the one that you have. So if someone's like, you're ugly, and you're like, holy shit, I'm ugly. Well, in your mind, you picture what you think ugly is, which again, it's subjective. Now, if someone says to you, "You're ugly," people are really afraid of hearing this. And what they don't understand is there's no such thing as ugly outside of fear. If someone is thinking that you're ugly, the person is really telling you, I don't have the skill or the awareness to bless this aspect of the oneness. And there's a lot of stuff you can do that's beneficial and loving towards people that don't have to do with insecurity. So insecurity, like, such a beautiful way to get past all the insecurities that exist is to believe them. Think that they are true. The worst things you've ever heard, or the worst things that you've ever heard someone say to someone else, that's you. You're not getting out of this thing without including everybody. So even if you're gorgeous, well, that's a hindrance in a sense, because you might not be processing the karmic energy of when you weren't gorgeous. And so external influence that's being leaned on it's another way of being a slave to something. If your self-value and if any of the ways that you're thinking are being validated externally, and you're taking that validation to compensate for an insecurity, then you are a slave to the external world, and there's no way to drop your character while being a slave to that world. You must stop partaking of the energy exchange. And the best way to do that is to start in the place that only life's rejected people are able to access. It's a place where you're known as a failure. It's a place where your obligations and your expectations and who you think you're supposed to be, who you're trying to be, you failed at all those. All of them. And no one believes that you're going to rekindle your ability to be what they want you to be. This is a horrible place that everyone's avoiding in the old social paradigm. This is literally the gateway to social, emotional freedom. This is literally how you untie your hot air balloon to take off. And and people don't understand that. They're afraid to lose the limited amount of power and love and appreciation that they have gained in order to be free. It's as you go and you start detaching from reality, there's a lot of fears that you hit, especially fears around family and relationships. Thoughts like, well, if I drop this relationship, or if I detach from this relationship, or if I detach from my desire for a relationship, then I lose all these people and all this stuff and all this. In reality, you take the burden off your relationship by feeding yourself what you need, which doesn't take very long until you don't need it anymore. We're creating a hole in ourselves to be filled by someone else as a way of, it's a form of a love language, an incomplete one, where you might be complete when you're single, or you might be one of those people who complains about how horrible it is to be single. But again, my cat's going crazy. But nobody can give you anything if you create that you are now emotionally damaged, right? People talk to each other about relationships, and they talk about like, you complete me, or everything was one way until I met you. It's like, they're really like romantic things to say in a pop culture sort of way, but they're not accurate, and they can be very dangerous on this path, because you're externalizing certain viewpoints that you yourself can create, feelings you yourself can create, and you're putting them onto other people and saying, and we call that romance, to lose our space to stuff, to let stuff have an effect on us. We think things we value it, and that's just, if you understand how ridiculous that is, then you can also understand how there's an immense amount of power in that. We are succeeding at limiting ourselves even more so that we can show ourselves that we are loved by something else. Think about how much we've limited ourselves in order to be loved by our parents and have it matter, or God, or our peers, or ourselves. And we just keep putting ourselves in positions of incomplete, hoping that stuff will complete us. Every few hours we're hungry so that food can complete us. You don't need food to stay alive. You don't need to stay alive. Again, that idea it sounds abstract, but it's really not. The idea of being alive is an idea that comes from a place that's not alive. So, let me explain what I mean by that. The thought of staying alive can only come from a singular perspective. That perspective is afraid of dying. Now, when you change your viewpoints on stuff, you die. Your personality in who you identify as is based around your resistances, your defense mechanisms, justifying those, and trying to figure out where that place is in the world, and creating a talent tree for whoever that character is. So you immediately start it stunted for some reason. And then you have to climb up, and then most people, the false version of themselves that they create, they don't even allow the false version that they create to get what they want. So now they're fucked, because you've actually created a worse version of who you are. But it's a more confident, justified version. And you're still pouring all of your energy into desires, but now you're playing a game where all your energy is being lost somewhere in between trying to get your desire and failing at that. And whose fault it is, how you feel about it, how much you need it. I mean, there's just not an end to it. And anything that makes you move, anything that makes you get out of bed in the morning, can be identified as an anxiety, and can be identified going back to a viewpoint of someone who has to do it. And you can identify who you see yourself as, how you see yourself, and you can follow those identifications back to the memories where they were started, right? Like, let's take one and follow it all the way back. Let me think of one that I have. Okay, one I've been working through right now. This is at the forefront of what I'm working on. So if you're working on this, good luck, because I know how hard it is. I desire, one of my major life desires is to not be misunderstood. So it's not to be understood, it's to not be misunderstood, right? So this idea, I don't want to be misunderstood. You can think about this, a lot of people feel this way, right? So if you take this statement, then you can say, well, who is the I? And then you can get a visual of how you see yourself. It might be looking in the mirror at a certain age. It might be how you project yourself to look at a certain time. But you can figure out who that I is if you're ready to let it go. And if not, it just means that you truly think you're the continuation of that I, and you're not ready to see yourself. And in that case, there's a whole, it just takes time. Just have it in your heart to release yourself from your limitations and fail and fail and fail and fail and fail and fail until one day you just let it go. There's plenty of stuff that's really, really hard to let go right when you think of it. So, I don't want to be misunderstood. Well, this goes back to times when I got blamed for things that I didn't do, and I had to take responsibility for pain that wasn't mine. Well, this is what we're all crying about. Everyone wants to not be responsible for pain that isn't theirs. But the kicker with that is that we're not even responsible for our own pain. So you can guarantee that in our lives we've been pouring our pain out onto everyone who would believe that it was their fault. And so we don't have an accurate representation of who is whose pain and what pain is ours. And so because of that, and if you believe what I'm currently entertaining, which is that everything that you see is a reflection of yourself, and all the other versions that you see walking around are externalizations of something that you've never accepted in yourself, whether it's good or bad, then you can understand how you'll transcend the idea that you don't want to take on more than your share. Because in order to transcend who you are, a lot of that has to do with enlightened thinking. And if you're not simply just yourself, let's say you're trying to emulate and take on the idea of being all the people, all the humans, then you're going to be taking on all the pain. It is your responsibility then. Total responsibility is the potentiality that it is all your fault. And so it sounds terrible if you're afraid of getting in trouble. But there's no one to get in trouble from, except for other versions of yourself who you projected would judge you for certain things, and you should get in trouble for stuff. So once you do this, you start to understand that we need more versions of ourselves to tackle more of the filth and more of the pain that is on the planet. And you're not a martyr. It's not that you're putting yourself through something bad, even, because it's just an elementary idea that responsibility is draining, or that it's an obligation. There's no reason why doing the dishes should be dreaded. It's the resistance to doing the dishes that's tiring, and it's the reason that you don't want to do them. But if you turn it into something you do want to do, right? And you can do this with taking responsibility for problems, for emotions, for aggression, for your past, for your government, for everything, then you can do something about it. And that something is you're connecting with something in its pain. When someone blames you, they're in their pain. Their sliver is on the surface. And if you say, no, I'm not going to touch that, I'm not going to touch that, that's not my sliver, I'm not fucking pulling that out. If you say that, then, well, the sliver goes back and gets deeper a lot of the time. But if you're like, if you can change your idea behind aggression, behind violence, behind hatred, behind judgment, and understand that everyone is doing what you're projecting them to do. It's not even, I mean, there's so many layers on what a person is, but this is just such a primal idea. Like, it's a very shallow idea, like what entities are beyond this. There's so much more, but honestly, the information isn't even reaching people because of these sorts of limitations. If you don't want to get in trouble, then you need to get off this path. Because at a certain point, when you switch your paradigm from one thing to the other, or if you change your thinking on anything, and you're going to have an ultimatum. And some people skip this. Can you incorporate your new paradigm into your social character? and speak for it, believe in it, have your emotions and your energy behind it, create your past so that it validates and enriches that. A lot of people lose their path just because of the fear of that, being judged. Well, again, people judging you, one, they're judging you how you would expect they would judge you from your perspective. So it's actually you're externalizing your own judgment. Two, it shows you where you're limiting the human being's consciousness. So if they're judging you from a certain place for a certain thing, right? Your hair looks stupid or whatever, right? You think you're fat and you go out and then you see some really cut person and the person's just, you imagine, right? You go to the gym that everyone's like, look at this fat ass. What are they doing here? Well, you're going to project that onto the people you would think that. And therefore, as that version, those versions of yourself, you are calling this version of yourself fat. Therefore, you are exiling yourself. You are hating yourself as the greater version of yourself, as the collective. And so, first and foremost, you have to work on loving yourself. And that requires an insane amount of self-validation, and not necessarily in some sort of pseudo-spiritual way. I mean, you literally have to accept who you are, accept who you think you are, accept who other people think you are, and the lowest way you can think about a human is the worst version of yourself that exists inside you. It's the slowest kid in your class. It's the part of yourself you don't want anyone to see. It's the parts of society that are getting extremely dominated by the higher parts in the externalization. And so somebody has to, one of the incarnations has to create the peace. And peace can happen only when the wound is exposed. Because that's what peace is the transmutation. Taking something you're in resistance to and turning it into something not only you're not in resistance to, but this is the best part. The things that are the biggest pains and the biggest fears and the densest part of yourself, they are filled with electricity. And that electricity, you haven't learned how to run through the body yet. And so it's scary. So we shroud it. I mean, it's an energy we can't touch yet. So we cover it in a bunch of crap, and then we blame the clouds we put around the electricity. Like, oh, well, that's bad over there. Like, I can't do that, or that person's terrible, or someone doing this with their life is horrible. It's like, well, buckle up, because that's how you sign up for going through what that person went through. And trying to avoid that by blessing everything doesn't necessarily work either. A lot of times you have to really go deep and understand that your character that you're playing since childhood is condemning aspects of reality, and you fall into those aspects constantly. And so by condemning yourself, the defense mechanisms are validating themselves staying inside you. And by creating the fear, because when you create a defense mechanism, generally there are pivotal points when you have a high amount of fear or you're experiencing something you've never experienced before. So you create a defensive or side version of yourself. You can call it a demon, invite a demon in, or a spirit. You can call it schizophrenia. You can call it a bunch of different things. But at the end of the day, it is a part of yourself that is invested in the belief that you need a defense. And so it is a self-perpetuating system. From that moment on, it starts to convince you that everything in your life is the thing that you're afraid of. And thus, it is necessary in every moment. And those things, they start to farm your energy. And so you can think about that. your biggest fears. I went through at least 10 years of hyper social anxiety, and it's not abnormal on this path. You haven't updated who you are socially. You haven't regained real confidence after taking apart the part of yourself that had fake confidence. And so you're sitting in a super vulnerable spot. And it takes a lot of training and a lot of time in order to get yourself back to a point where you can face judgment head on. And then it takes even more time to face judgment head on with compassion and love. But a lot of it just has to do with the application of a few pretty simple ideas. Some of which I just talked about. Things like if someone is trying to hurt you or judging you, the person is showing you what they're afraid of being seen as. If you allow yourself to be seen in the way that they are trying to see you, then you can do something about it for them. You can help them. Today, for example, I was at a coffee shop and I came outside and there was maybe a 12 or 13-year-old very fat kid who had a lot of pain in his eyes, skateboarding with a couple kids his own age. And as I came out, the kid said, "You're ugly. You're ugly as shit." Right? And so this kid, I know this kid. I've been this kid. And now if you're afraid of being judged and you don't know that you are fat and you are ugly, subjectively to certain people, you're never going to be the best person. And that's a good thing to know, because you're never going to be the best, no matter what. And the point isn't to be the best. Even if you are the best, you're not the best, because time, different variations of you aren't the best. So, and you'll never be the best compared to higher levels. So judgment is something that is beneficial. It's showing you how you see the world. People aren't judging us in ways that we haven't comprehended yet. And if they are, we're dumbing it down to what we're afraid of hearing. We see people do this every single day. You can talk to someone about something and they just funnel 10,000 different ideas in the same poor me, or the same you're suppressing me, or insecurity, fear. And so there's just not anything to do. So with the kid today, what I chose to do was just say, "Yeah, I am ugly." He's like, "Your dog is ugly too." I'm like, "Yeah, my dog is really ugly. We're really ugly." And the idea behind it is the kid is screaming out in pain. Someone obviously told him he's fat and he's ugly. You can see it in his eyes. And before someone told that to him, like a lot of us, we didn't really know that shallow things like that were sources of hierarchy, or that they mattered. Well, once someone tells you, you become enlightened to the fact you're a complete failure by a standard. Well, if you're able to take that energy and show people that the energy is not crushing, you don't have to cry later, you don't have to tell the kid, "Well, you're fat," right? You don't have to feel bad, you don't have to retaliate. Then the energy is transmuted slightly, at least on the planet. And that is, I mean, how many billion of us there are? Just that idea, if we were able to experience it on a large scale, would be just like cleaning up our oceans, our beaches, or whatever. It's no one is cleaning up the emotional pain of being judged on this planet. And so, in order to be judged, a great thing to do is to go get judged. Put yourself in situations where you're an idiot, the fool. I always say shit your pants at a party. These type of things make it so that if you don't have your social reputation, and that could just be your looks. Even if you're beautiful and people don't even know you, your social reputation is how you're perceived and treated. if you can take that to a point where it's not propping you up in a continuous social viewpoint, then you're going to be infinitely closer to dropping the part of yourself that's in pain and dropping the mind and the past. And it's tough because we get a ton of what we would consider validation and peace and happiness and security and positive viewpoints on ourselves. We get those from other people. And like I said before, that just... you have to ask yourself, do you want to feel good because someone tells you something about yourself, something subjective, something that is fleeting? Or do you want to know how to feel good? And not only to feel good, but how to feel any way. Because you can teleport between different dimensions by using your imagination and backing it up with your emotions. That's all it takes. You just have to be able to do it. And for the most part, it's seemingly impossible. And that's why it's not talked about outside of mystery schools and people training in certain things like this. But reality is not real. You're already stuck in the reality you're in because of the exact energy, emotional exchanges that you're having. You're experiencing it from a social character that's not your choosing, inside of a paradigm and a setting that's not your choosing, that you're not even aware of. And all these things are happening on top of each other. And there's a ton more I'm not mentioning. The collective consciousness, astrological stuff, influences from electronics, and all these things are basically creating a third dimensional, really slow storyline about acclimating to more and more frequencies in the spectrum. And so we create a bunch of stuff in the rainbow and we say, I don't like that, or I like this. Well, that's not really how it works, because each part contains the whole. And so that can be used for your limitation or your benefit. You can be good vibes only, but if you don't know how to create your own vibes under every circumstance, then again, you're feeding off of something vibrating higher and more consistently than you, and your life is completely out of control. And that's true. It's true for just about everybody, and it's very normal. That's how it's supposed to be, because it makes people easy to control. And so the whole point is, if you can be controlled, or if you have any attachment to the one paradigm you're in, you can't join up with the higher self part of yourself that can choose between paradigms, that can switch dimensions, that the reality you grew up in and spent 20, 30, 40, 50 years in, it's only one perspective. And it's not even real. It's completely subjective. You made patterns based around childhood ideas, and then you slapped a label on it and you're walking around telling people about it. It's not real. You can make patterns out of anything, at any time. And you can fill any idea up with emotion and make it real. Energy and motion. And so there's just a huge cult around this server. We'll call it a server. This Earth server. And it's everybody wants to be... This wasn't this way 20 years ago, but now everyone wants to be spiritual. Everyone wants to be enlightened. Everyone wants to be liked. Everyone wants to be go green. I mean, the pseudo-spiritual movement is nothing more than going green for our minds and our emotions and our souls. And so if you're going to do it, it doesn't have to do with anyone else. You can create a support group, but to find honest people who are going to tell you where you're bullshitting yourself, if you find them, hold on to them. And if you are those people, then bless you on your journey, because everyone is going to be very aggressive towards you. Honesty is unbelievably damaging to the false egos. And the point is to cultivate compassion so there's no resentment. Because a beautiful idea of freedom, when given in the wrong energy, can become an idea rejected for a lot longer. And those kind of things can hurt people that we want to help. But on your own end, you can learn how to squeeze the spiritual growth potential out of any situation, including violence and hatred, including any of these things that are condemned on this planet. Absolutely, absolutely. There is nothing on earth that can happen that you can't have compassion for. It is so popular to be victimized. It is so popular. But there's no one coming to save you. There's no one coming to save anyone in that regard. Because it's a subjective opinion and you're gaining free energy from being victimized. You're telling people, it's not any different than standing on a street corner and asking people for money. Those people had to use their energy to go get money. If you want money and you're not willing to do anything, you're going to get handouts. It plays to people's good nature, but you're a slave to the fear of making your own money, your own energy. You made the external world so important. There's no space. There's no security. There's no peace to allow a depth of the internal world. I experienced this exact moment one time in a dream, like 3 years ago. But anyway, the external world, it's all controllable. And I don't know who this is going out to. I don't know who's hearing this sort of information. If you're hearing this and you haven't turned this off and you understand it, then you at least are on this path. And hopefully this provides you with some sort of reassurance. There is an end. There is benefit to detaching. You don't lose everything. You gain. You remove the cap of only having your limited self. So anything you detach from isn't immediately exiled from your life. It just means that you've released the grasp of the singular ego enough to allow your multidimensional self to view it. So now you can view it from an infinite amount of perspectives. And in doing so, it reverts back to the ocean of creation. It becomes chaotic energy, undefined potentiality. Because if you can see something from an infinite amount of directions, in those directions, allow whatever you're seeing to cause an emotional reaction, whatever you're choosing, to affect the reality in whatever way that you choose, or whatever way you allow. This transmutes all matter. And so the matter doesn't stay. This is this, this is this, this is this. That's not true. That's just in the world, the old world, the third dimensional world of singular egos fighting for limited energy. We're not in that world anymore. We can jump out. The ascension wasn't just some thing that happened. It's literally the ending of the illusion. And so the illusion's long over. You can get out of it if you want. But in order to do that, like I said, you have to detach, not only from the things you're in resistance to, but also the things that you're getting energy from. Some people might not like this analogy, but it's motivated me a lot to think about the physical world as the world of Satan, the world of the devil. And in a lot of different religions, this is true. And so anything that you're wanting or desiring or anything that you're experiencing in that world is keeping you in hell. It is making a deal with the devil to circumstantially compensate for something, a form of lacking in yourself that you made up, you defined, or someone told you and you believed, both of which are your responsibility. Because like I said, anything anyone does is subjective. Therefore, sitting around feeling bad for yourself because something happened will change its meaning. You can do that right now. I mean, you can do that with anything. And if you're not sure of how to change something's meaning, let me give you an example to clarify. If you were abused when you were a child, you are thinking you're hurt and you are trying to find a solution. This was me. And in trying to find that solution, you try to find someone to blame and you try to find a way to get past it. Well, that's wrong thinking. It's not. You're not going to get past it. Not with that thinking. The thing to understand is people are in pain. And when they make you feel the same pain that they're in, they feel not alone. And the more pain someone is in, the lonelier they are. And the fewer and fewer people who will match their energy. So if someone abused you, let's say you kick someone out of your life, and a lot of people who just didn't get the response they wanted from family members, and so they don't talk to them anymore. Well, this is a perfect example of something you can do. You can call up that family member and first go into meditation, view what happened as if that person was in pain. You were the person who had big enough shoulders to carry some of it for a while. They took it out on you to ease the load. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You can't get hurt. You're already hurting yourself by being limited because now you have to die. So no one's killing you. If you're watching this, you're alive, I'd assume, unless there's some sort of hidden way to watch this from the afterlife. Who knows? But to play the victim to something is to villainize someone else, which is a violent thing to do as well. Because let's say someone hits you. Okay, they hit you. I've hit a lot of people. I've been hit a lot because I have a big mouth. And that's just it's a great thing. It makes sense. If you're not going to out-talk someone, you're going to hit them because you want it to stop. You're not ready for the energy, and that's totally okay. But let's say someone hits you, right? And let's say it even does something worse. Let's say someone punches you in the face and it breaks your nose. Okay. Well, first let's start with they punch you in the face and it doesn't break your nose. Okay, you get punched in the face. You have that moment of shock where everything goes like in a movie when all the sound disappears and then there's a ringing and then you start to notice a pain. A fear comes into the body. You start to analyze the pain, assess it, see if you're okay, not okay, and then you keep your guard up and you try to figure out what to do with it emotionally. Now you might retaliate. That might be the permission slip that you need in order to finally get yours, or to treat someone in a way that you've been holding in your entire life. There's no one-sided fights. There's either helping someone heal or both people are projecting. So you hurt for a few minutes, your jaw hurts for a few minutes. Your jaw might hurt for a couple days, your nose might hurt. You might break your nose, you might have a couple weeks, have to get surgery. But that person who hit you, that might have been the realest thing that they've shown anyone about the emotional state that they're in their entire lives. And that's the most vulnerable that they can be. Now, if you play the victim to that person's core of their pain is now going to be attributed to all their guilt and shame and all their justifications. And it's just going to trap them. And that's what this victim movement is doing. It's trapping people in judgment. Are there people who do stuff intentionally to hurt others or because they're selfish? Yes. They're called humans. And we're one of them. So you might have different ways of people justifying it. People might be giddy about hurting you. We all know people who are just over the top. But those people are in pain. And they're just hiding it. And so if we wish to get out of pain, first we must understand our pain and the pain of others. And we must see that hurting people and taking positive vibes from people when we don't have them are essentially the same. because we're trying to exchange the byproduct of our wrong thinking with somebody else. And that's just going to lead to more misery. And if you're the type of person who enjoys an intense challenge, which I would guess quite a few of you watching this are, then this kind of stuff is a dream come true, because the cap is what you would be considering enlightenment. The cap of how hard it is. So you can turn the difficulty up to Jesus getting crucified on the cross and stabbed and everyone spitting on him and all that. I mean, that's the high score. So it's fascinating if you wish to push yourself, because every single day you can meet resentment or judgment with a smile. And that starts to become addicting in a sense, because of how hard it is and how it doesn't come up very accidentally. And it's liberating, because you're liberating yourself from judgment. You're liberating yourself from social control and fear. You're liberating yourself from the interlocking storylines of the lower dimension. You're liberating yourself from the identity of separateness and the good and bad, that there is a heaven and a hell, and someone is better than another person. I mean, it's truly a liberation, and I can't imagine going from point A to point B without going through this. And so I think it's really important to face judgment and to face whatever your destiny is. Whatever you've experienced in the past, here's an exercise to try. Write down the major things you talk to people about. Write down the major things you don't want people to know. Get a good list of 20. Now take every single one of those and write down a perspective that is beneficial to everybody involved. And then get your emotions behind it. And when you're there, forgive. Don't go back. There's no need to go back. You're already there now. Is it benefiting you? Well, not if you're watching YouTube videos on how to get out of it. Probably not. So the point is, there's nothing about victimhood that's beneficial, unless when you were a child, the worse you felt, the more love your parents gave you to try to make you feel better, which a lot of people feel that way. Like they weren't loved unless they were sick. Well, that's true, but that doesn't have anything to do with you. It has to do with the person's fear of losing you. And so, again, it has nothing to do with you. It's just insecurity from another person. And they're projecting it onto you, that you're an answer to their insecurity. So if you're gone, then their security or their good feeling is going to go away, which isn't true. It's just an idea. This reality is over. No matter what you think, it's over. And the potentiality to transcend what we would consider our gods is right here. There's no need to be less than loving because we believe someone else is, because we believe gods are. Good, then pass them. It doesn't matter. Go past. There's no one saying that you can't. There used to be. There used to be a very real belief on the planet that we were all living in a permanent sin. Well, fine. Let's say you are. Well, what are you going to do now? Well, the only thing you can do, real or not, is to become better at being yourself, better at loving. And I don't mean yourself as in this suppressed ego character. I mean, when you can see everything from every perspective, something magic happens, and it's worth it. It's the ability now to travel between dimensions, all sorts of dimensions, and it's incomprehensible. Anything can be anything, therefore nothing is nothing. And that space when nothing is anything is, the closer you get to that, the closer you get to the oneness, the primordial goo of potential. And it is not empty. It is packed dimensions upon dimensions. The multiverse lies inside of this. And as long as you're narrow-minded, you are slipping between multiple dimensions every day. But you're experiencing it as a singular unit and collapsing those dimensions into one separate dimension that you basically call your own server. And it's lonely and it sucks and you can't get out of it, and the best thing you can do is try to find a way to make it a little better. Well, fine. And no disrespect to that, all of this is advanced versions of trying to do that. But I'm telling you, it can be done. Everything can be anything. And if you're so sure something is something, grab it, make it something different. The ability to transmute shit. You can't grow a lotus flower without mud. So there's a lot of mud, and we're all made out of mud. And so a lot of beautiful stuff has been done with garbage. And no one wants it, which means it's free. And so if you're afraid of being something, be it. If everyone's afraid of being something, be it. There's plenty of resources there. If you're an asshole or piece of shit, it doesn't mean treat people worse. But what it means is entertain the thought that you could be an asshole. You could be a piece of shit how you currently are, and use that as a permission slip to reanalyze all your thought processes. A lot of times on this path, we justify being right about everything. I know I've done that a lot. That's why I have videos where I'm talking to the internet. It's the idea of thinking that I know something that whoever's watching this doesn't know, and I should impart that knowledge onto them. It's ego. And it's not helpful if you're identifying with it. It's helpful if you look at why you're doing it. And you try to see, okay, well, I'm afraid of being misunderstood. Okay, well then, a part of me wants to be understood. It's not the wholeness of it, but a part of me wants to be understood. In order to do that, I have to send messages out to the 8 billion people and then see if people watch this, the specific people, and then they validate my perspective. Well, that is consuming energetically. It's not necessary. It's not necessary at all. And just remember that anything can be anything. There's not a need to keep anything what it is. There's no form of loyalty that's worth it. There's no form of limitation. The victimhood, the energy that you get from your role in society, no matter what it is, no matter if you're the most beautiful person on earth or the richest person, it's nothing. It's garbage. It is absolute garbage because you can't travel between dimensions. And so the best that you can do is create a better version of being stuck in hell. Once you can travel between dimensions, which is a birthright, then, well, there's not even a then. Anything is possible. And so, just remember, if it causes an emotional reaction in you, it's tied to a story. And that story is tied to who you think you are. And who you think you are is tied to your past, and it's tied to believing you're a singular individual and the setting it believes it in. It thinks that's real. And just all that, even though it's one thing, is enough to collapse the quantum field of infinity into something that you could want to kill yourself over or create death existing in order to get out of. You don't need to die after you've unhooked yourself from a specific reality. Because, like Rick and Morty, or any sort of television show where they travel between dimensions, there's an infinite amount of energy, resources, and versions of yourself, and the ability to travel in and out of those things at will. It's incomprehensible. It's not even worth limiting, because that's where we're coming from, is a limited place. And so hopefully this has been helpful to an extent. And if not, it's helpful to me to be able to say it. And if you're on the fence about whether you should let go and detach from something and let yourself experience a new perspective. Use this as your permission slip. It's definitely, I can tell you from experience, jumping off those cliffs that you'll never be able to climb up again is beautiful. You're able to really get off that fence between, do I want to continue to be this person or not? Quit the things, quit your indulgences, find your addictions, and take the power back from them. They're not as powerful as they seem. They're only as powerful as your laziness. If you don't want to stop drinking alcohol, if you don't want to stop eating meat, if you don't want to stop doing these things, you're going to make them hard to make them impossible to stop. And you're sure as hell not going to be able to learn to love yourself as long as the main foods you're consuming on earth are other beings, believing that they should die so that you could have a casual, unconscious meal is really violent, and it's really hard for you to be able to love yourself, because they're all versions of you, and the version that you currently are is not anything more special than the other versions that you are. And the sooner that that's realized, actualized, and practiced, the sooner you can get out from the third dimension, which is a sinking ship. And so the frequencies are shifting, and they always are. So hopefully this helps. I know obviously it's a little emotionally charged and there's some passion behind it, but a lot of that comes from how many years I sat on the fence and the pains of not knowing if I should proceed, or what I was going to lose, or the parts of myself I was going to lose, and then going through the entire process to get the bravery and seeing what it's like on the other side of these decisions. It's infinite. You're no longer having to play a role, and you truly can be free. And I think we all deserve that, because we all have something sick to create. Each one of us could create their own reality we could all visit, instead of all of us resentfully pouring our energy into a limiting reality that someone else created, or we're externalizing as a powerlessness. And so, I mean, just let me know if you're doing this and working on this, because it's not just like a YouTube video to talk about this. It's important, and there needs to be more community among the parts of ourselves that are reassimilating with each other intentionally. And so hopefully we can create something like that here. I don't consistently make any videos about anything, but I talk a lot. And so hopefully I'll be able to at least create some more foundation if you're feeling out there and alone. Hopefully this helps. This is a lonely path, and it's lonely because in order to truly experience connectivity, you have to springboard off the depths of loneliness. You can't be afraid of being alone, and then you'll transcend it. So it has to be alone. And if not, you're going to die alone too. So there's no point in avoiding it. You were born alone. You've been alone the whole time. And no matter how close someone sits to you, or if you have sex with them, or if you have a deep conversation, only the viewpoint is singular. And so as long as you're in the viewpoint, you're alone for sure. And I'm just trying to share that you can transcend it, and we can all help each other. And the more we help each other, and the more we love each other, and the more that we allow people to take out their emotions and to share who they are without judgment, the more we're going to heal as a society. But right now we're condemning everybody. There's nobody who's not being judged harshly. And it's so beneficial to face that judgment and to take it. Don't try to get out of it. Don't convince yourself you're not in the group being judged. Be judged. There's nothing wrong with it. That's how people are able to survive. They judge stuff. It's based off their experience and their programming. And the programming is propaganda. So as long as you're living in that reality, getting out is the only thing you can do, other than buying accessories to place around yourself in that limitation and hoping that they resonate in some celestial way and something else pulls you out of the limitation, which, again, it's a self-imposed limitation. So There's no one coming to save you from the self-imposed limitation. Hopefully this is some sort of attempt at someone trying to reach you inside of that isolation. But either way, I wasn't even sure what I was going to talk about, and I just hope that it's helpful. And if anyone wants to talk about anything that has to do with this, feel free to get a hold of me, because I know that it takes a long time to implement it, and I know it's scary, and you lose everything, including yourself. But it's worth it. It's so worth it. And I just wish you all the best with everything.